Want to go to John Yoo. I love having John on because he's so darn smart on this legal stuff. So the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General is kind enough now to weigh in on what the president just did yet again on student loan forgiveness. I think we're up to, as he just said, our reporter, Lucas Tomlinson, John, to $138 billion worth of loan forgiveness with this additional $1.2 billion. And I believe half that number before the Supreme Court had already said cease and desist, you can't keep doing this. He keeps doing this. What is the Supreme Court's recourse if he keeps ignoring them?
The justices are not going to like a president who's trying to defy them. As you said, Neil, last year, the Supreme Court in a case called Nebraska versus Biden stopped a much larger student loan forgiveness program. And now Biden's trying to play games. He's trying to tinker with the programs, but he's still trying to cancel debt for, I think, actually the real figure, if you annualize it all out into the future, is more like $450 billion. That's what this Penn Wharton model says, and there are no dummies over there at Penn. And so if you look at this, the Supreme Court is going to say, is the president really complying with our decision from last year? Or is he trying to defy us, to evade us? Now, the court's got this new doctrine we've talked about on the show before called the major questions doctrine. It essentially says we're not going to let the president find these tiny little statutory holes, the court called them mouse holes, and find huge elephants in them. That's a Justice Scalia phrase, of course. And so what the court's going to say is, did Congress, when it passed a very small loan forgiveness program, really intend to give the president the power to essentially forego collecting $450 billion of the taxpayers' money? Last year, they said no. I find it hard to believe they're not going to say no again.
So they say no again, and he keeps doing it through these executive actions. Where does the constitutional line blur? It's because it's very unfocused right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, Neil. What's going to happen is that someone's going to have to bring a suit. Now, that was hard in the last case because the Supreme Court also says, well, no taxpayer can just sue and say, I'm suing because the tax burden has gone up. You have to find someone who's really harmed. Last year, it was the state of Nebraska, state of Missouri, I think, also got involved. So you're going to have to find another state that's already involved, I think, in the student loan business, or people who collect loan checks on behalf of the government, and they're going to have to bring suit. But it's going to be hard to find a plaintiff who can actually get all the way to the Supreme Court to challenge it. And unless you do that, President Biden can get away with this for a year, maybe even 2 years, until the Supreme Court can weigh in again.
So, John, wasn't the argument when they opposed his doing this is not the president's call, that the House controls the purse strings of government, and they make this move. He's doing that regardless of that very clear directive. So what's to stop others from saying or petitioning the president, I'm behind on my car bills, maybe you could issue an executive order to forgive that, or I'm behind on my medical bills, maybe you could do something for me, or others you could say, maybe you could lift the income caps for me on any and all of the above debts. You could see quickly how this gets out of control.
Oh, yes. I mean, if you want to talk about the policy of it, I don't see why this government wants to take from the less well-off and basically give a tax benefit to the better off, although, right, the government's been doing that for years, and things like forgiving mortgage interest, not forgiving, but allowing people to deduct it. But why should the government go around and start forgiving people's debt when they've made the choices, they're middle class or even upper class, and the people who chose not to go to college, chose not to borrow money, have to foot the bill?
So where does this go? If it's a couple of years, I mean, Joe Biden could be out of office by then, but the money has already been doled out by then. You can't claw it back, can you?
Well, this is the interesting thing about what happens when a new president takes office. If President Trump comes in, for example, he wins, or President Nikki Haley wins, then they can suspend this regulation and pull it back. You got to feel bad in part for all the student loan borrowers because they're being whipshawed back and forth about whether they have to pay the government back or not pay the government. One thing that presidents can do, though, it's one of their most important constitutional powers, is that they can reverse the executive orders of the president before them. So President Biden can create this program, but theoretically it only lasts as long as he's the president.
Yeah. It is, well, like he issued executive orders to undo executive orders, President Trump had regarding border security issues. I don't know how you keep up with it, John, but I'm glad you do. John, you, following all of that, the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, the former Justice.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.